Okay, so Friar Lawrence. Let's take a look at Friar Lawrence's actual words, because I always like to pay attention to the actual goddamn. Also, can I tell you, in the Romeo and Juliet movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, I love the actor who plays Friar Lawrence, and he's in this other cool movie called The Usual Suspects. He played this guy named Kobayashi. He's fucking cool. He's a Pete Postlethwaite or something. He's got a funny name, Pete Postlethwaite. Anyway, he's a fun actor, and I really like him. Um, this is a thing that happens in Shakespeare studies, by the way, I'll tell you, is sometimes I'll read a play and I just like won't even give a shit about some character. And then I'll watch a movie, and if the actor does a good job with the character, it will totally change my mind. And the way Pete Postlethwaite is, his Friar Lawrence is so perfect that I think when I read Romeo and Juliet, I don't care that much about Friar Lawrence, but he's so good. The actor's so good that he makes me love the character, and this is the power of actors to kind of change your mind about stuff. When I read a Shakespeare play, I hit certain parts and I'll hear them in the voice of an actor, and then I'll read on and I'll hear the next speech in the voice of a different actor from a different movie, because I've seen so many Shakespeare movies. That as a reading a play for me is like hearing 12 different actors in different parts deliver different lines in different ways. And the actor who plays Friar Lawrence in the 1996 movie is, I just really like him. I don't know, it's irrational. But also I'm a middle-aged man and a teacher, so whatever. Let's take a look at Friar Lawrence. He has a little bit of, you know what? Actually, I'd love to see some papers on. Friar Lawrence has a little bit of a Dumbledore, Professor Xavier vibe to him, in the sense that, like, he seems like he's helpful, nice, and kind, but actually is sort of sneaky and manipulative and maybe causes a lot of trouble, and also isn't great for teenagers. So if you're looking for a paper topic, I would love Dumbledore compared to Friar Lawrence, or Professor X compared to Friar Lawrence, because they're both, and teachers, old men manipulating teenagers, being sneaky. They're sort of heroic. They're also sort of jackasses who get a lot of teenagers killed. So I don't know. Something to think about. That's a really good paper topic I just thought of just now. Okay, let's keep going. So Friar Lawrence, I'm on page 10. This is Friar Lawrence's first appearance in the play. This is his opening speech he gives, and what his opening speech is he's gathering flowers. In the movie, you see him sort of playing with plants, and experimenting on them, but he's gathering flowers, because religion. He's a monk. He's a Jesuit monk, which means his whole life is dedicated to learning. This is one of the reasons why I like him, because my life is also dedicated to learning. But Friar Lawrence is dedicated to learning, and he's a monk, and so one of the things he learns, and obviously, he studies the Bible, of course, but he's studying other things too, like plants. He's learning about, because the monks are the ones that because they give up the world, in order to live in a monastery, they have a lot of free time to like learn all this shit. So he's learning about plants, and he gives this lovely speech. It's such a great speech. In the movie, he's like lecturing these two kids, and I quite like that too. I think that's very well done. But let's take a look at his speech. The gray-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night, because the sun's coming up, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light, and fleckled darkness like a drunkard reels from fourth day's path and Titan's fiery wheels. Titan's like the god of the sun. See how this rhymes? Night, light, reels, wheels. Now ere the sun advance his burning eye, the day to cheer and night's dank dew to dry, I must fill up this osier cage of ours, it's a basket, with baleful weeds and precious juiced flowers. The earth, that's nature's mother, is her tomb. What is her burying grave? That is her womb. And from her womb children of diverse kinds we suckling on her natural bosom find. For many, many for virtues excellent, but none for some. Oh, my thing's gonna flip over. But none for some, and yet all different. This is a speech, about Mother Nature, and he's sort of picking. The sun's coming up. And he's out picking plants, and he's thinking about all. He's picking up different kinds of plants. So some of the plants are baleful weeds, meaning they're just like terrible plants that are just gross. But some of them are precious, juiced flowers. So he's thinking, boy, Mother Nature, she makes a lot of different kinds of plants. Some of them are great, some of them are terrible. And then he, like a philosopher, he kind of backs off a little bit to make a bigger point. And it's an interesting point. He points out that the earth that's nature's mother is her tomb. What is her burying grave? that is her womb. This is a sort of paradox in Mother Nature, that the same place where you find death, you also find life. The grave and the womb are the same thing in Mother Nature, because the plants spring forth out of the dirt. That's like being born, but they also die and get buried in the earth. And you think of death and life as being opposites, but his point is that Mother Nature sort of has them both happening at the same time. And then also she makes good and bad plants. So he's sort of thinking about this sort of duality of existence with the flowers. And that's kind of lovely. Um, and that we find many virtues excellent, right? Lots of the plants have really good qualities. None but for some, and yet all different. So every plant has some kind of use, but they're all different from each other. Mickle, which means mixed. Oh, mickle is the powerful grace that lies in plants, herbs, stones, and their true qualities. This is in the movie. He says mixed is the powerful grace that lies in plants, herbs, stones, and their true qualities. He's going to give some examples here. For naught so vile that on the earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give, nor aught so good, but strained from that fair use, revolts from true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice sometime by action dignified. So he's pointing out that plants they're good and evil. Mother Nature is both where things are born and also where things die. That the womb is also the grave. But interestingly here, he points out that there's all different kinds of plants, some good, some bad. But then to make life more complicated, he says that bad plants can be used for good, and good plants can be used for bad. So he says, not so vile that on the earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nothing's 100% evil, nor aught so good, but strained from that fair use, revolts true birth, stumbling on abuse. So, nothing's 100% evil, but nothing's 100% good either. It depends how you use the plants. Right, so and I think he gives an example a little later on. Actually, I'll keep going to get to his examples instead of stopping to give you my own. He looks at a plant and he says, within the infant rind of this weak flower, poison hath residence, and medicine power. For this being smelt, with that part cheers each part. Being tasted, slays all senses with the heart. So he points out that it's that Mother Nature is paradoxically, ironically, both the birthplace and the grave. Right, her womb is her grave. The plants that are born there also die into that. The plants that are born of the earth die into the earth. And he says there are good plants and bad plants. Right, they're mixed. They're mickle. But then complicatedly, the good plants can be used for bad, and the bad plants can be used for good. And he gives an example of this, which is that he has a plant that if you smell it, wakes you up. It's like a stimulant. But if you eat it, it stimulates you too much and you have a heart attack and you die. So that in a complicated way, it's not just that the earth is both the birthplace and grave and womb at the same time. And it's not just that some plants are good and some plants are bad. It's that individual plants can be both good and bad. They contain good and bad depending on what you do with them. And because Friar Lawrence is a monk, he expands this out. He started with individual plants, and then he went to talking about Mother Nature. Now he wants to talk about human beings. And so he expands it out to like a moral lesson. And the moral lesson is all this shit about, he's not just telling you about, this is not a biology lesson about plants, it's a moral lesson about people. Two such opposed kings encamp them still in man as well as herbs, grace and rude will. And where the worser is predominant, full soon the canker death eats up that plant. So he says, yeah, plants contain both good and bad inside them, but so do people. They contain both grace and rude will. Grace here, think about it being like special, sort of freedom from God, freedom that God gives you. Rude will is like just doing whatever you want to do. And one of the meanings of will is lust. And so, you have sort of your animal desires, but then you have a higher ability from God to think about philosophy. And just like the plants contain good and evil, so do people. Now, this is not a random lesson about plants or a random lesson about people. These lines make you think about the characters in the play who seem to contain so much good and so much evil at the same time. And nobody contains more good and evil than Friar Lawrence, who seems to both be a really helpful, kind old man and also a meddler who gets a bunch of people killed. He's sort of describing himself here. He's the one that contains both good and bad. Okay, see you in the next video.